This wasn't a murder, and no one broke the law. At least, that's what everyone believed. In 1850 Atlanta, a slave was considered powerless, harmless, invisible. But one overlooked detail inside wealthy homes quietly began to unravel everything. A secret no one thought could matter started spreading. This is a real American crime story.
The year is 1850, and the city of Atlanta is a powder keg. Not of civil unrest, not yet, but of secrets. Deep, personal, destructive secrets. And at the heart of them all is a man named Henry, a slave. But not just any slave. Henry was described as extraordinarily handsome, possessing a charm that could disarm anyone. This is his story, and the story of how one man, through no overt act of violence, managed to destroy 17 prominent families in Atlanta. It's a bizarre truth. A male slave stripped of all legal power, all social standing, and yet he held an almost invisible, devastating power over the very people who claimed to own him. How could one man, bound by chains, shatter the lives of so many powerful families? This isn't a tale of rebellion, or escape, or even direct malice. It's far more insidious. It's a chilling testament to the hidden vulnerabilities within a brutal system and the unexpected ways human desires, concealed and denied, can explode with catastrophic force. This isn't just a historical footnote. This story matters because it lays bare the corrosive nature of absolute power and the desperate lengths people will go to protect their reputations, even at the cost of their souls. It reveals how easily denial, hypocrisy, and the rigid social structures of the time could create a pressure cooker where the truth, once exposed, annihilated everything in its path. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of human nature under duress, and how systemic injustice doesn't just harm the oppressed, but also corrupts and ultimately destroys the oppressors from within. Let's step back into Atlanta in the mid-19th century. A bustling, growing city fueled by cotton and the enslaved labor that produced it. Society was rigidly stratified, wealthy white landowners at the top, followed by merchants, artisans, and then at the very bottom, enslaved people. Property, not people. And within this oppressive system, Henry existed. His exceptional good looks were both a blessing and a curse. They caught the eye of his owner, a prominent plantation owner, whose name has largely been lost to history, overshadowed by the scandal Henry would unleash.
Henry's primary role was not in the fields, but within the household. He was a house slave, a position that, while still brutal, afforded him a different kind of proximity to the white families. He served meals, cleaned, attended to needs, and in doing so, he saw everything. He heard whispers, observed glances, and became intimately aware of the intricate web of relationships, both public and private, within the elite circles of Atlanta. The story truly begins not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, almost imperceptible shifts. Henry, through his charm and proximity, became more than just a servant in many of these homes. He became, for many of the white women, a confidant, a forbidden fascination. In a society where women, especially those of the upper class, were expected to be demure, submissive, and confined to domesticity, Henry represented something dangerous, thrilling, and profoundly taboo, a source of genuine connection, or perhaps simply a fleeting moment of stolen intimacy, away from the often cold or domineering gaze of their husbands. It started subtly, a kind word here, a shared glance there. Henry, intelligent and observant, understood the unspoken anxieties and desires of these women. He became a conduit for their frustrations, their loneliness, and in a society that denied black men agency and humanity, he found a perverse form of power in these illicit connections. The exact nature of these relationships is, of course, shrouded in the historical silences imposed by shame and societal repression, But what is clear is that a significant number of relationships spanning across several prominent families began to develop between Henry and the white women of Atlanta. These were not always relationships of love, but often of convenience, of escape, of forbidden desire. The risk was immense for both sides. For Henry, discovery would mean torture, sale, or death. For the women, it meant utter social ruin, ostracization, and potentially violence from their husbands. The initial crack in Atlanta's polished facade came not from an act of violence, but from a whisper, a rumor, then another, and another. In a close-knit, gossipy society, secrets rarely stayed buried for long. The subtle changes in behavior, the veiled looks, the hushed conversations, they all began to coalesce into a chilling understanding among some of the men in power. Their wives, their daughters, their sisters were entangled with a slave. The initial reaction was disbelief, then rage. How could this happen? How could he do this? The blame, naturally, fell squarely on Henry, seen as an immoral seducer, rather than on the systemic conditions that created such desperate circumstances for both the enslaved and the supposedly privileged. The white men of Atlanta, deeply invested in their honor and the purity of their bloodlines, saw this as an existential threat, not just to their individual families, but to the very fabric of their social order. The investigation, if it can even be called that, was not a formal legal process. It was a panicked, desperate attempt to uncover the truth and then, more importantly, to bury it. Families began to interrogate their wives, often with threats and intimidation. The women, trapped between their secrets and the wrath of their husbands, found themselves in an impossible position. Some confessed, driven by guilt or fear. Others held firm, denying everything, but their behavior had already betrayed them.
As the truth unraveled, the connections of Henry became horrifyingly clear to the men of Atlanta. It wasn't one or two isolated incidents. It was a web, intricately woven, touching 17 distinct, powerful families. Each confession, each discovery ignited a fresh firestorm of scandal. The pillars of Atlanta's society began to crumble from within. The mechanics of this destruction were simple yet devastating. The exposure of these relationships didn't just cause personal heartbreak, it shattered reputations, dissolved marriages, and called into question paternity. In a patriarchal society where lineage and honor were paramount, the idea that a slave could have fathered children within these white families was an unbearable disgrace, threatening the very inheritance and social standing of the entire elite class. Contrast this with the popular narrative of the time, which would have painted Henry as a manipulative villain and the women as naive victims, or worse, fallen women. The uncomfortable reality was far more complex. Henry, despite his circumstances, wielded a subtle power that exposed the deep cracks in the moral facade of the slave-holding class. The women, stifled by societal expectations and often emotionally neglected by their husbands, sought connection in forbidden places. And the men, obsessed with control and ownership, found their ultimate authority undermined by the very people they enslaved and the women they claimed to protect. The consequences were swift and brutal. For the women, many were quietly divorced, sent away to distant relatives, or confined to their homes, their lives irrevocably ruined. For the men, their honor was stained, their social standing diminished, and their trust shattered. Families that had once been intertwined by marriage and business deals now stared at each other with suspicion and resentment. The social fabric of Atlanta's elite was torn to shreds. And Henry? His fate was predictably tragic. The details are sparse, deliberately obscured, but it is understood that he was either sold away to the Deep South, ensuring he would never return and that his story would be forgotten, or he was murdered. His existence, a walking, breathing testament to their hypocrisy, could not be tolerated. He had to be erased. This horrifying episode reveals several profound truths about power, trust, and human nature within oppressive systems. It shows how the institution of slavery didn't just dehumanize the enslaved, it distorted the humanity of the enslavers, creating a society riddled with fear, hypocrisy, and festering secrets. It exposes the fragility of social constructs like honor and purity when confronted with the raw, untamed forces of human desire and connection. What this case ultimately reveals is the profound vulnerability of systems built on injustice. When one group holds absolute power over another, it creates perverse dynamics. The enslaved, denied agency, sometimes find it in unexpected ways. The enslavers, believing themselves invulnerable, create the very conditions for their own downfall through their own moral failings and the impossible pressures they place on themselves and others. The story of Henry, the handsome slave who destroyed 17 families, leaves us not with a clear resolution, but with a haunting question. Was he a seducer, a victim, or merely a catalyst? And what does it say about a society where one man, stripped of everything, could, by simply existing and connecting with others, bring so much destruction to those who held all the power? It's a testament to the fact that even in the most rigid systems, human nature finds a way to assert itself, often with devastating and unpredictable consequences. If you found this unsettling exploration of history compelling, please make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that pull back the curtain on the hidden truths of the past.